Welcome. This is Makers of Chains. I am Patrick Parker.
And I am Matt Bowens.
And we are here to talk to you about blockchain. Not Bitcoin, but blockchain.
And blockchains, because there's more than one.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and then go through a little bit of introduction on what we hope that this podcast will be about and exist for. And to kick that off, we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves. So, Matt.
Yes.
Who are you?
Who am I? Good question. This is a enlightenment episode, I suppose. I got into Bitcoin, if you will, in 2010 or 11. Actually just started talking about it with some fellow computer geek friends of mine and I about the potential of it, being that at the time it was worth a nickel, a dime, something like that. And then we started talking about, getting this wallet, purchasing some, and then mining. At least for me, I got into learning about the technicalities of mining at the juncture of which it was no longer worth my time to mine, at which point Ethereum popped up in 2013, and so of course I was intrigued to jump into mining. So I purchased some fancy graphics cards, got into a pool, and did that for about 6 months, and then it was between boredom and cost that led me into learning about the underpinning technology of it, which led to figuring out what Solidity was, which is the primary object-oriented language behind Ethereum. And then it's changed over the last couple of years, my attitudes about it. It's gone from media side understanding of it to the full technical understanding of what it is, philosophically, how it's paradigm shift, and sort of reorienting the perspective of where all this is going to go.
So kind of like the future.
Yeah, blockchain is a vehicle, is a really sweet self-driving Tesla to get us to this place that is the future, and what that looks like when all industry is applying this technology, and what that looks like from a design perspective, from a UX perspective, from just a use case, how humans will use this and how they will reorient their relationships with each other personally and professionally with blockchain. Because for me, distilling it down to the finest of bourbons, blockchains to me are, as compared to everything in the past, is the ultimate peace treaty. Flattening power structures, the redistribution, not necessarily of wealth, but of opportunity and potential for people. We're looking at the world here. We're not just looking at our special place in Minnesota or in the States of the underbanked, people that don't have access to economic systems.
So access to entry, how to get...
Yeah, and access to stable political relationships, not necessarily with like politicians and stuff, but just with each other, right? The peer-to-peer aspect. So what leads you here? What has brought you to set forth chains of blocks?
So thinking back to like what you were talking about, 2014, 2015, being that I've been in the field of mental health for the last 10 years, most of my time spent researching, cool tech and development is, via, news outlets that, are sort of not your traditional Fox, ABC, NBC, CBS that were covering some of these things. And so I can remember back to 2014, 2015, reading some articles and seeing some videos of these mining rigs. Like different mining rigs of like different GPUs and like different cool things that people were doing. And what are they mining? Okay, they're mining Bitcoin. I'm like, what is Bitcoin? And so, coming from a non sort of dev technical background of trying to teach myself and like piece together like, what it meant. And so 2014, 2015, it went away. I probably didn't read about it for,
You put it in cold storage.
Well, when it was worth a nickel or like, $10, there wasn't a lot of news coverage. People weren't, writing and creating content about it. And
it was still in mockery phase of like this weird internet nerd money that was causing the Mt. Gox Silk Road.
And I do remember the Mt. Gox thing, and like I've just recently found out that was inspired by Magic the Gathering, which still blows my mind that these these cardboard playing cards inspired, well, I don't know what you'd call it. What's a good word for corruption in the crypto world? Crypto corruption?
Crypto corruptions. Yeah, fair.
So I remember reading about that, those big news stories, but I would say within the last year, kind of mid-2017, started reading more about the possibilities for some of the things that you already touched on around like evening the playing field, and especially around identity, access to entry, how an individual can take more control of both their information, their data for their personal self, and also how it's distributed, how it's shared, knowing who it's shared with. I mean, I think that's a huge thing that blockchain can do for kind of protecting and evening the field, is that individuals will have the opportunity to know who's accessing their information and what they're using it for. I think there's a lot of data being collected about us that we have no idea that it's being shared with and what it's being done with.
Yeah, or just the repercussions of it, right? Like the concept of entropy of these giant systems that might have an idea or intent. However, just the laws of physics suggest that the larger a system becomes, more randomness is introduced.
And a lot of times I think people are well-intentioned and like they want to help, and sometimes things scale too fast or get kind of out of control, and it goes in a direction that maybe isn't as beneficial to the individual, to the person as the project starts out at. I see a lot of possibilities for blockchain technology in that realm, and that really hooked me and got me interested to learn more about it. So yeah, that brings us to today, present time, 2018. And Matt, what in our discussions, what's the reason why how did this podcast come about? What were we, what are we trying to create? What do we want to do?
Well, one of my first thoughts when conceiving the notion of creating a podcast with blockchain as a recurring theme, or the central theme, was just exactly how remarkable this will change things. How we're not sure, right? But this is one of those sorts of you can't put the genie back in the bottle moments. It's the same, when Tim Berners-Lee put the World Wide Web, put a face to the internet and didn't necessarily know what was going to be made of that. Tim Berners-Lee, it wasn't like, well, shoot, if I do this thing, we're going to have Facebook. We were a million years in philosophical and technological hours removed from that, point A to that, Facebook point and mobile and things that we have now.
So you're saying he didn't think that there would be technology to listen to your conversations and send you advertisements about buying cat food?
I think he had an intention of providing an outlet for cat domination globally. I just don't think he knew exactly what that was going to look like, specifically YouTube or CryptoKitties, if you will. So I'm excited by the idea of this talk of Web 3.0, if this is it, and being a part of that space, 1990, 1991, when we had this massive internet revolution, but also knowing how this changes the rules for everybody, not just first worlds second, or this changes the rules for everyone.
And that's a big thing that I think that people aren't seeing when they see articles or news clips about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, is that there's not a lot of headlines about like the way that this could change, globally affect people, especially outside of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, how this is working, how people are using this in Venezuela, how people are using this in Greece, how people are using this in Africa. I mean, a good example is just check out Steemit profiles and pages. Steemit is essentially a decentralized version of Facebook. They'll tell you, like, they post their videos, their sort of vlogs, if you will, and they'll give you first-person perspective of like how this has changed them, but how they have the ability to crowdfund now, which they didn't have before. Like, we think of Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and stuff like that, but no, this is like that. They were still divorced. Divorced from an economic structure that we take for granted.
And here we think of a way to increase our wealth in other places, and maybe for clean water, access to having land rights, right. Other pieces around identity that could help them survive or be able to kind of live life more safely, in better health.
Yeah, or finally to transition out of the living space of having to survive as a community.
Right. And that goes back to like what we had talked about before, access point, that they have the ability to do that. Some of these things and these passions that we have are why we wanted to do this, to give more of a broad viewpoint on blockchain and what it does exist. Now, there are other podcasts about cryptocurrencies. There are other podcasts about Bitcoin, how to mine, how to start an IOC. But as a whole, we wanted to offer an ICO.
There might be IOCs.
Well,
yeah,
they'll throw off regulators if you just change.
Internet of Coins.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
Totally different than an ICO.
Yeah,
it's an IOC. No, the IOC is the International Olympic Committee. They're the governing body of the Olympics.
All right, I get it.
So I got Olympics on the mind.
Russians aren't in control of that. They can't wave that banner.
If you're listening to this podcast, like, we want you to be here and to expect that we're going to give a broad, look on blockchain as a whole, and we will most definitely be touching on some of those specifics around, cryptocurrencies and the market, but that is not what specifically this podcast will be about. So, touching on that, Matt, what should people not expect from listening to this?
How or what to buy when it comes to ICOs, what exchanges are better than others. Though we might touch on like what exchanges to avoid entirely, because we don't want you to lose your mortgage, which is already a bad idea. I will suggest right now, don't get a second mortgage to buy crypto. I will say that. That is financial advice. Don't bankrupt yourself.
We'll also be talking about what to look for to see if it's a legitimate business or if it's just an absolute front for a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. There's definitely a tsunami of scammery that is at least perking up the ears of the media in terms of what they want to talk about, but that's their jam, is sensationalizing. So yeah, we might be here as an inertia damper for some of that, for those Star Trek fans out there that get that reference. However, we've covered pretty well. It's like we're passionate about the development of this community, both here in Minnesota and obviously everything that's going on in the world, seeking those out that are doing things in this space, seemingly fairly small right now in Minnesota, in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. However, it's relatively just small everywhere. Like, even if you bought crypto today, you would still be part of like the 4% of people on Earth that have done that. So we're super early. I do think though that the pace of which this will innovate is probably faster than the development of Internet 2.0.
Well, and with the speed that it's moving, it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of people have said that 2018 is the year of blockchain, and Zuckerberg has mentioned other, big important people are name dropping blockchain. But yeah, I mean, what the next 5 years is going to look like, no one knows. Everything could be running on a blockchain in 5 years, or it could still kind of be in that infancy development stage then. Which is doubtful, but
yeah, which isn't really innovative in the sense of vast majority of people are operating a blockchain, so they're just operating a more secure database. That's marginal innovation compared to what this can be, and I mean that goes.
But implementation of that is close.
Right. That's one part of it, right? That's the big thing of Bitcoin is that it's the world's largest bug bounty. We're going on 9 years. It's never been hacked. Like if someone can get into that, even with the dip, they're getting to a substantial amount of liquid. But it's been proven that it can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
That falls under, imagine if all companies, all banks, all insurers and stuff had to operate like the Medicis did during the Renaissance, except their books were available to all of Florence when they were writing them. Things would probably be drastically different. Philosophically, that's a major advancement in terms of human behavior, power adjustment, hierarchical adjustment,
and
accountability.
That's where the speed of how it moves and how the progress that it'll be interesting to see. The more that people share and the more that we work as a community to educate each other, for the better good of the world and humankind instead of individuals and corporations. The speed at which the technology could move there's no way to hypothesize what it could be like.
It's the velocity is overwhelming.
So,
I mean, we could run this podcast 24/7, get a couple chat bots, leverage our time so we can pass out once in a while. But yeah, we could just run a perpetual podcast in terms of the level of change, innovation, and just chaos that's going on in this industry.
So you touched on it a little bit, talking about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin has never been hacked. It's been in existence for
since January of 2009.
So let's transition a little bit. Talk to me and tell me about what blockchain is and how it protects Bitcoin. How is it so difficult to hack?
Bitcoin is an example of a blockchain, right? Sort of the first one. And Bitcoin, blockchain, is essentially a recipe. The anonymous Satoshi, our modern Martha Stewart, took these ideas of peer-to-peer, which Napster introduced in the late 90s, the fancy schmancy Byzantine general's law, which is a 35-year-old computer science problem that was published in the early 80s. You have the hash 256 cryptographic algorithm, which was designed by the NSA in the early aughts. Satoshi, whoever that person may be, or organization, or rogue AI, put these ideas together and stewed them up and crafted this incredible technology. And that's what breaks it all down is the transparency, which comes from part of that recipe. The immutability, being that once it's in there, it's not coming out. The profound cryptographic security of it, which no modern computer can touch. Like if we were to combine all the supercomputers on Earth, it might be able to break the SHA-256 over a matter of time. Now, once we get to quantum, that'll be a problem. However, people are already building out solutions for that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, those are all the individual pieces that make up this really compelling story that is this technology. And Bitcoin, is just the first use case. And then when you get into Ethereum and things, you're talking about like an additional layer that advances.
So when you're talking about blockchain coming from Bitcoin, now correct me if I'm wrong, but most developers were inspired or having read and researched the tech behind Bitcoin. That's where Ethereum and some of the other platforms came from.
An early use case was a eCash currency. One didn't even make it like outside of the developer's mind or computer. The other one essentially got shut down by the feds. And that was in the late 90s, early aughts. Nick Szabos, is that his last name?
Sabos?
Yeah, who invented the first concept of a white paper. In a white paper he published for a smart contract. That was sort of the underpinning, technology idea behind a smart contract, which is what Ethereum uses. And yeah, that producing the idea of a Turing complete being any sort of computer or environment where you can program literally anything you can, the operations, like beyond 1+1, right? Is putting a Turing complete system on top of layer 1 or Gen 1 blockchain. So that's called a DApp, a decentralized application. So now you can build an Uber app, you can build a web browser, you can build a file making system, anything of that rapport on top of this already established Gen 1 blockchain. And there's already Gen 3 blockchain, which is called a DAG, not a chain, if you will. A chain of chains, a web of chains.
So talk about the difference between blockchain and what a blockchain is versus a cryptocurrency. So we were just talking about Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Ethereum, that's a little trickier to explain than Bitcoin. But
sure.
How can we differentiate the two words? Blockchain versus Bitcoin or blockchain versus cryptocurrency.
Well, think of in one sense, a blockchain is not a proper noun. People refer to Coke and soda as interchangeable. For one reason or another, cultures make them interchangeable, but one represents a type, company that makes a type of soda. But soda is the overarching formula that makes up this carbonated drink that can be a myriad of Mountain Dew, the thing that Morgan Freeman drinks during the Super Bowl or the thing that Santa Claus drinks during Christmas time. Bitcoin is a brand of a blockchain. And a blockchain is the umbrella of which that brand is made up of. Ethereum is sort of the progeny of both of those. This thing of the DAG I mentioned is also. Cryptocurrencies are also a derivative of a blockchain. So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrencies aren't all Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a store of value, with its wallet and its technology in itself of security. Cryptocurrencies can be the same as that. They might have varying rules as to how secure that exchange is, how it scales, transactions per second, the value of which a market associates that cryptocurrency depending on what other value it brings to the table. But the other thing is that Bitcoin isn't owned by anybody. So cryptocurrencies are being created by consortiums, by private companies. Whether they decide to make them public, private, or a hybrid is up to them.
So who owns Bitcoin?
Nobody owns Bitcoin. That's actually one of the beautiful things about it.
Who started Bitcoin?
Nobody knows. Someone by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, who could be the Illuminati, could be a rogue AI that is pushing us to build Skynet, one Raspberry Pi, one phone, one laptop at a time. It could be a government. It could be the most seemingly altruistic person of all time. They set aside for themselves roughly a little under 1 million Bitcoins for themselves. They've never cashed out. It's hodling there. There's only going to be 21 million total, and it'll take till the year 2140 for those to all be mined. Which is, that's quite significant. So maybe Mother Teresa came from the grave, learned about cryptography and databases and peer-to-peer networks over the last 15 years, and decided to put this thing out on the web on January 3rd, 2009. Nor is it really important at this point.
Right. Well, and that's the part sometimes people get too locked up on some of that. And it takes away from what we're trying to talk about and to bring to the forefront, which is the blockchain technology. Instead of getting caught up in current dollar value of a Bitcoin or what I can buy with this or that there's much more power behind the technology to innovate, to create.
there's just as a media phenomenon, they're stuck on the financial aspect, applying sort of stock market mentality, IPO mentality, lottery ticket mentality to shorting this industry that hasn't begun coming to fruition yet, which does at least tell me that perceptionally a group of people they're literally buying into this, whether they're doing it for the right reasons or not. Hearsay, but it goes back to the genie can't be put back in the bottle. We're always going to be hearing Robin Williams' voice from here on out.
So, going back a little, you just mentioned kind of the financial sector and how that how that is going to work with blockchain. Can you talk a little bit about the horizontal versus vertical hierarchy of that, and kind of how blockchain changes the game on some of that?
Yeah, well, I'm thematically obsessed with this in particular. Just historically speaking, power structures have always had a vertical hierarchy, and it's a lot of times been dictated, if we go back hundreds and hundreds of years, that's been dictated by power of arms, power of militia, hereditary systems that have been designed, just de facto family power, so military might, financial might, but those are usually, those people have access to the most innovative technologies to, of course, then have a competitive edge, would usually equate to financial gain. But then it's also the ability to manipulate those things, which allows them to retain sort of that top of the pyramid. That all comes down to rules. Rules without rulers, which is a famous phrase that Andreas Antonopoulos always talks about, who's sometimes referred to as Bitcoin Jesus. It's potent, and it makes sense to have rules without rulers. And you would do that by way of mathematics. Of course, humans have to have a consensus on that, but it's all voluntary by way of smart contracts. However, once they're put in place, there's no changing the rules because someone dies and now their 12-year-old is in charge. Or we have an election and all of a sudden one party is now in charge and things are literally go the complete opposite way, seemingly for arbitrary reasons. You just don't have. My favorite is Henry VIII. Here's a guy who changed his mind on his religion, which caused severe consequences throughout his country and all of Europe, simply so he could divorce his wife. And that is the most extreme circumstance, but it's a real circumstance that we as humans have experienced. And to take that power away from a central authority, and hopefully at best torrent it, if you will, across a community that is about consensus to that power. So we're sharing that responsibility. So it empowers individuals, but that's where it stops.
Well, and that's where individual, a teenager in the Ukraine, that if he had the ability to teach himself how to use blockchain technology and how to make it so that it was attractive to a group of people, that he has the ability to do that without government or money or internet access getting in the way. And that the more we make it horizontal and available to all, it takes away some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And this does force us to reevaluate, do we want structures like that? But maybe more importantly, are we okay with those structures? That's going to be part of the struggle. I would suggest that there are people that would rather have a paradigm that is vertical and not horizontal for whatever reason. But even talking to people like this and provoking people with new sorts of technologies that could be built in blockchain, and going down this yellow brick road, their Emerald City seems to always be, but there needs to be someone in charge. And it's almost ingrained into us.
The mighty and powerful Oz, like the...
Yeah, there needs to be someone behind the curtain or not. There just needs to be someone pulling those levers. Strangely enough, in the society we now live in, where seemingly we trust nothing, we're still okay with the very system that has caused us that distrust. But that's how ingrained human structure is in us as a culture and as a society.
So makers of chains, we definitely want it to be about the community, and that both can be, the community locally here in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and also be, community at large, nationally here in the United States, but also the community can also just talk more about people who are interested and kind of have that shared common interest and want/need to find out more about blockchain. We definitely want that to be a part of this, and to be able to give updates and talk about who's who and what's what, and kind of try our best to keep our listeners up to date with what's going on. Now, that's going to be impossible. Just like Matt was talking earlier, we could live stream ourselves 24/7 reacting to what's going on in the industry, but it is moving way too fast. So we definitely want to make a point of doing that, and it's been great to interact and to meet some of the people here, locally here in Minnesota. And there's a lot of really exciting, smart, passionate people working on different things around here.
It's definitely, I wouldn't say a balance, but even the things. There's just things we're not going to cover because we're not interested in them or whatnot. And some might say, well, you're not necessarily an expert in this. But that's the brilliant thing about this industry, is that there are no experts. There are people that have done things. There are people that have built things, that are building things. But what they're building may be obsolete in 2 years. They'll have to just keep. We're all going to be learning on the fly. And this is sort of indicative to our culture now, that Carl Sagan sort of foresaw in the Demon Hunted World, where if you're not prepared to learn, good luck keeping up. And that's not just necessarily in terms of a job, because who knows what jobs are going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years, or work, or whatever you want to call it. I think blockchain does pose an interesting foil to this understanding of UBI, Universal Basic Income. Because if we can tokenize value into anything, and we can come together as a community or as a culture to accept that for value. For instance, there's a company in San Francisco now that built an app that is sort of Uber for just anything in your house. So if you have camera equipment or camping equipment, and you're not using it, that's wasted. It's wasted. But now we have an infrastructure that allows you to rent it or lease it, or even borrow it for nothing to people that don't own it, but they need it want it for something, for it to go camping, to shoot a project. They don't have $5,000 to just lay down and buy that equipment, but they have access to something like this, and you have a whole house full of things that now can be turned into sort of this perpetual cycle of utility. I mean, that's one aspect that blockchain can help. Same thing with co-working at all spaces, right? Mm-hmm. So empty restaurant tables, empty movie theater seating, anything that's
empty appointment times with a therapist.
Correct, yes. And reorganizing all of that to a value state where we're sort of, what is that? What do they call that with clothing? Upcycling. Mm-hmm. We're upcycling all this bounty we already have, but we're distributing it to in a manner where it provides more opportunity to those that otherwise wouldn't have it.
Mm-hmm. It just goes back to we talked about before, access point of entry, that making that more accessible and available to those who may benefit from it most. Because unfortunately, in some areas of our society, the people that would benefit from these types of things most are the people that have no access or knowledge that it even exists.
Yeah. Another great example is this is a prime technology to introduce into spaces, communities, like in our own neighborhoods. What third world countries are doing with this stuff is profound, but like relatively speaking, we have third world spaces in our own communities, right? Like we have people that the unemployment is terrible. Like we have communities that a large majority of the people are like coming out of prison. We have mental instability, financial instability that would greatly benefit from this technology far more than the person that's already making 7 figures and figuring out how to just add this technology to their bank.
Open another LLC and diversify.
Yeah. One of the most interesting projects in this application to me is some companies in Texas, I think there's one in Ohio, where they're looking at taking blockchain technology and implementing it into a mesh network. Your community essentially becomes their own internet service provider. Well, if that's the case, not only do you get a community that is considered whatever, financially handicapped, walled off, whatever. I'm not politically correct, I don't know what to call these things, but like people that are in communities that are down, like if you could get them to build out their own ISP, which can eventually become self-monetizing, but then they have access to one of the huge variables that are handicapping them, like not having internet, not having it, but not being knowledgeable of the fact that you essentially need it to live. Because right now it's a matter of living and surviving. Like if you don't have access to the internet and the World Wide Web, you're surviving.
Well, and that goes back to some information that I've read about happiness, and that an individual that is homeless and begins making $20,000 a year, that their happiness grows. That's like a huge jump, but that
right.
An individual that's making $125,000 a year for their household and they get bumped up to $175,000, that it doesn't really change their level of happiness.
Yeah.
And that to give and create more access to individuals that would benefit from it and that would be more life changing, that would be great.
Yeah, and I think that gets to a point where the top of the live how they want to live chain, I'll say like Elon Musk is doing what he wants to do, but at the same time he is moving humanity into literally a space that is profound. I imagine that if you get the vast majority of the people that are not living the way they want to live to at least be in a trajectory where that's a possibility, that helps everybody, him, us, right? It's this idea, it removes the zero-sum game. It's more like there's a consensus that we all fight for the jewel of the room, whatever those terms are. Like reorient that to supporting each other in all making connections, and that helps everybody. And this elimination of there's just this obsession to, like, as much as like we want someone in charge, there's an obsession to be in a room with somebody, with a group of people, and then invent what the trophy is that we all need to fight to attain.
Right. Well, and that's the us versus them. If there was one, humanity as a whole, there wouldn't be such a need to constantly be challenging other people to be better than them, to win, to be above, to have some sort of dominance over another person. It could just be we, humanity as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it pivots away from excessive, right? Because we all want a thing in life. We all have goals. We have at least at some level a dream of like our ideal self. It might not be the best, like we might not be going about it the best way, but everyone wants or envisions a life that's better than the one they're currently in for one reason or another. And there's just a weird mechanism in society where that dream or the means to get to that metamorphosizes into competing with somebody for seemingly no other reason other than to get the thing that they think is going to get them to that dreams. You work with a group of people at your job. You have dreams, they have dreams. They could completely not coincide with one another, right? You both don't want to live in the Swiss Alps sitting in a hot tub, smoking cigars, eating chocolate. One of you does. The other one wants to be in Belize
on the beach every day,
building a tiki bar and just hanging out with the locals and having the time of their life. Someone else wants to go to China, do missionary work. But we're all like in this space together and we're doing whatever it takes to reach that goal.
And that's the point, to find ways to empower and support each other no matter what what that goal is, what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think it's changing the system of which we all live in to achieve our goals changes so that it doesn't become toxic where we all forget that we have each a dream that we're moving towards, and now it's like I got to be cutthroat so I can get my boss's attention, so I can get the promotion. And all that whole time, you forget entirely like why you're even doing that, because the energy that you're expelling to like devote to this system that demands a central authority. I mean, it's completely headspace consuming and depleting. And I mean, it's not abnormal to meet people, to like have a conversation with them, figure out like what they really want, and then just kind of know inherently like life gets in the way. And a lot of the time that has to do with this bizarre like general fight we have as a culture for that weird trophy, whatever that weird trophy is.
So another part of what we also want to be able to touch into like get to people that maybe don't have that kind of like developer background about what blockchain is, and we want the podcast to be able to reach out to them so that we're educating your mother-in-law who saw Bitcoin on the nightly news to someone who's been creating smart contracts on Solidity. We want it to be a space for everyone and anyone who has any interest in learning more. So some of the things that we hope to do and be able to share with you are talk about some of the kind of pop culture stuff that you may have heard about. Talk about CryptoKitties and what that is.
Or its adult counterpart. Leave it to your imagination to fill in the blank.
There's lots of adult counterparts to all of these things. Also want to talk a little bit about what it would be like to go and buy Bitcoin from an ATM machine.
Oh, yeah.
That exists, and there are ATMs possibly in your neighborhood where you can go buy Bitcoin out of that. So we'll be talking about that. We also want to talk about
if I interject, just imagine when we get to the point of like when Internet of Things gets really off the chains, all puns intended, I don't know, where maybe that ATM doesn't want to have a relationship with you right now and it gets up and walks away and no Bitcoin for you today. I digress.
Yeah, or it tells you not. It tells you that you can't.
It's just not in the mood to engage financially with you right now.
No, that's the future. We also want to talk about some of like the positive and negative news articles that come out there, and maybe dive in a little deeper into what some of it means. There are lots of postings and news articles, 30-second clips, or 2-minute blog post reads that give like a very, very specific snapshot of things that. More information and a lot more going on than what's being shared in the widespread media. We'll both the negative side, the positive side, the good, the bad, the ugly. We want to give space to educate what's behind some of that stuff. So Matt,
yes.
Besides listening to this podcast, where can people find us?
Yeah, so we're gonna have a space on Medium, Maker of Chains Medium page, our website, which will be makerofchains.com, which will just archive our podcast, and we'll have ancillary content, events that are going on in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. We'll have space in the decentralized social media world, which is steemit.com, and DTube, which is the parallel to YouTube. We'll be around, definitely, but those are good places to start.
And like always in any kind of evolving educational learning space, we'd love to hear from any of our listeners. If there's anything you'd like us to touch on, anything going on within the space that you think is important, or anything blockchain related, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to drop us a line and contact us. We'd be more than happy to chat about what people want to hear about. So Matt, I was thinking about a good send-off to end all the episodes with, and I don't know if you're a Truman Show fan.
It's been a while. It's been a while. Yeah.
But good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that just seems too, I think like we might have to come up with a blockchain crypto version of that.
Yeah, so I was thinking to go super meta on this, where I was thinking of the Tick cartoon, at least the cartoon show, where his battle cry was spoon. The only it would make sense to say fork. But then that might not be enough, and we might want to get the ears of the mouse and just say, "May the fork be with you."
Do you think Disney would come out?
Who? I don't know who.
You think Disney would come after us for that?
I don't know who that is,
Yeah.
but I imagine someone dressed up as a mouse or something with a castle on it.
So then that means then we'll have to definitely dive into the fork and
Yeah,
for those of
there is a dark fork and a light fork. They're more like hard fork, soft fork. I feel like there's a game about to be made with this line of language.
All right, so thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much.
May the fork be with you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Pat.
And may the fork be with you.
Till next time.